So I think it was wonderful to see those 4 presentations on the topics that the young teams are working on now. And the question really now is, how can we as an audience, and as we break into teams, support these teams and ideas? My initial thoughts, and I'll share them broadly with the teams, is that the journey to the moon begins with a single step. And although it's important to have the big vision of what one wants to do, if one can't break that into something very practical, small, and easily understandable, then it's very difficult to communicate a vision. So if we want to create, I built a company, a beverage company in Russia, and I went to my father and said, I want to build this huge company that's going to have 20-30% market share in the country and X, Y, Z, and so on a piece of paper. I want to conquer the world. And he said, look, come to me with a practical plan about your first steps. What are you going to do? Why should I back you? And why does that first step make sense? And what help is it going to do? So I think it's very important that in the next 3 days, that these high-level ideas are distilled into something very concrete, small, with a clear vision about how it's going to change something. Because people often will find it difficult to back ideas that have multi-year and long-term perspectives. It's very difficult to see that. Whereas if there is a clear first step where you take one village, and that village, the ratio of education is X to Y, and you've changed that, and now everyone's educated, it makes a huge difference because it's an example, and people can focus on something very specific and how it can change. So that would be my recommendation, just as a thought to the teams. But it's going to be interesting in the next 2 days to work and see what type of advocacy you can create around your projects.
Well, along those same lines, I think it needs to be pared down again to a simple concept that can be communicated in a short 3 to 5 minute film. That these overarching plans with a lot of different threads, rather than simplifying, I think it's a matter of finding a single thread that communicates the overall vision. It's a metaphor for what the overall plan is, something that can connect with your audience. Finding a story of one child that is helped by a domino, a series of effects from stopping corruption. Or something that is just very contained, and it might feel initially like an affront to your big vision, that it's not doing justice to everything you want to accomplish. But the communication you have to garner support really is an ongoing dialogue. And that first step needs to be heard, it needs to be simplified.
Thank you all. And first I'd like to congratulate the 4 groups on the research they've done. And I know there's a lot of work has gone into this research. And now, these couple days, it's really our job to take that research and turn it into something useful right away. And I'd like to leave you with 2 ideas just to start out with, and we'll be working on this during this time. One is that it's really important that you know who your audience is. Who are you making these messages for? Who's going to be watching it? And the other thing more important is, what is your message? And I think that's what both Shiv and Andrew have been talking about. But I'd like to leave you with some ideas that in the many documentaries that I've worked on, and we are talking about, this is nonfiction filmmaking, this is advocacy filmmaking. I really like to use the concept of 3 eyes. And every nonfiction film has this first one, which is information. And most people think this eye is really what these films are about. It's about the information. But the fact is, when you walk away from a film that you've watched, no matter how powerful it is, I would dare you to come back with more than 1 or 2 facts out of it. You might have some, but no one knows any figures. And people think putting that information in there, that's communicating. But that's not it. Much more important is the next I, which is identification. Which is that you must put people in these that we can identify with. We're talking about the rag pickers, we're talking about people in villages. No matter who they are, we have to present them in a way that we, the viewer, can identify with them. But the most important eye of all, and the one that's the hardest to achieve, and the one that is only the best films have it, is inspiration. And that inspiration is getting that film to be to the point where it causes the person who's watching it to do something, to stop watching. We've all watched a million films and say, oh, isn't that a shame? Oh, isn't that terrible? And then we've never done anything about it. But what our goal here is to make films that actually inspire somebody to either go get their checkbook, or to start a group of their own, or to talk to their elected representative, or to change the way something is happening. So these three eyes we're going to work on that.
Thank you. Well said. I'm Raja Chowdhury, and I'm very pleased to be here, helping and mentoring and facilitating all of this. And what I felt was that watching the 4 presentations just now, I saw 4 massive NGOs in the making. And it was the scale of what they were trying to take on seemed quite daunting and formidable, yet ambitious and correct. It is essential that we address these issues that you all 4 have raised. And I think that what you need to do now is, and what Andrew said earlier, which is that you've got to hook on to one story or one piece of inspirational question that you can find or answer you can find in the area you're working in, like the slum dwelling garbage pickers, or something that you can focus your attention on to raise the critical 3 areas or 2 areas that you leave information behind, like you said, that you leave behind. And it's critical that when you do your concept planning and your writing of the script in the initial stage, you think about that hook, that story, that's going to start me off and leave me at the end inspired, motivated to act, and a feeling that I am involved in something that could one day become this great NGO, or this great way of waste management in the world, or great way of dealing with poverty. And I think that if you can achieve that in this 3 to 5 minute film, rather than trying to tell the whole story you want to tell a few good stories that we can remember and hook us in such a way that I want to do more with you. And that's going to be critical for the 4 groups to do. Yeah.
I completely agree with all the comments. I would add one more thing, that yes, till now, a lot of the TGELF leaders, student leaders, are from India, and hence the projects have an Indian flavor. But I want everyone to really be globalists, because that is the core genetic makeup of our organization. We don't believe in borders. We think borders create huge problems. And I want all the young leaders, I was disappointed to see India maps, India-related things. I was disappointed. It's not what I expect. It's about the world. There are people all over the world facing the same challenges and problems. Maybe it's a test case, it's a pilot in India, in a village, but it's about the issue. So please, step up to the plate. Become global leaders. These are global advocacy projects. It's not about solving the problem in India. It's not about India. You have 20 people from 22 countries in the world in this audience today. So we need to step up to the plate and try and figure out, it's an issue. Waste collection is an issue on the whole planet. It's not an Indian issue. Maybe we're solving it in India in a village as an example for the world. That's great. But it's not, I don't want this to be India-centric, just as a request.
And when you consider that you have a 3 to 5 minute span to tell a story in, right? The critical factor you want to remember is that you've got to conceive and write the structure of the story well in advance of trying to produce it. And it's very difficult, because when you're making a documentary, you think we just point the camera and we'll get some great footage and we'll assemble it and edit and hopefully it'll inspire. But actually, if you backstep a little bit and look at the concept that you want to achieve, that I want to leave you feeling that I've got to work on waste management, or I've got to, then that works backwards to what are the 3 points I want to tell in that story, right? So concept and storyboarding and story writing are a critical part of the first steps you must take today, and your directors will help mentor you and coach you on that. in that critical issue. The next step is that you're so many of you, and you're going to need to think about teams, because a team could be filming, or a team could be getting assets from the internet and downloading graphics, or a team could be presenters, or a team could be making music pieces, getting music together. So you've got to structure your teams very carefully and put together a team structure, right? This is the next part of, I would suggest. I've written a few. You've all received these notes we sent out. Then you also need to think about something we call style, right? That what do I want it to be like? Is it going to be a CNN style information graphic where I have graphs and charts and I see numbers and I see photographs? Or is it going to be CNN Heroes where I'm seeing a poignant human story of one person who's going to change the world? What style am I going for? What am I doing with the style? Right? I'm just going to run through one more with this. And then you're going into what we call production, which means that you now have to get those assets together, you have to make the film, you have to get the music together, you have to do the narration, you have to plan it all. The editors need to work with you on making the graphics you want, and then you edit. You're sitting and assembling everything. And that's the real art of this game. So I wanted to just give you those pointers, and you've all received this, and I hope you've been looking at it for the last few weeks, and then I'll hand it over to you now.
I'd just like to comment on two things that Raja just said. The first part about, getting your concept together before, I think there's a really easy way to think about that. And it only involves 3 words. Fail to prepare, prepare to fail. If you don't get your ideas and your stuff together at the beginning, you can't really fix it afterwards. That doesn't mean that we're not always open to serendipity and to wonderful things happening. But by getting a plan and going from the start and being prepared, that allows us to improvise when something fantastic happens. When the bird comes in and flies right into the picture, you're ready because you know that it's there and you're keeping your eyes open for it. The other thing, talking about style, when Raja was talking about this CNN type this, I think let's not, at this point, it's really important, especially for the next day and 2 days, it's really important to be extremely open to ideas. As you edit, the critical side of us comes out and becomes very important, and you have to say, is that working? No, get rid of it. In documentaries, we have this term that we say that you have to kill your babies. What happens is you get all these things, you really like them, but when you get down to the end, you have to say, is that working or not? And even though you love it, it's a great moment, but it doesn't work for the whole thing, you have to kill that baby. Maybe it's a bad term, but it makes it easy to remember what we're talking about. The fact that you love it, but you still have to put it away, maybe use it in the next film. But as far as the early part, when we have to be very open to ideas, let's not just go with CNN. Let's think about, what about making a musical about this? Exactly. What about some of our team actually acting or making recreations? Or even, what about a crazy satire? Where where you have people acting the opposite of what you think is good behavior. Where you show people, let's say, wasting prodigiously in a way that we never could imagine wasting. So let's stay very open to the ideas of really
style.
Something that's totally new. And don't say no. Don't say no until the last day when we have to really decide. Say yes, 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 no. We'll tell you when to say no.
When you talk about showing the opposite, or just trying to think out on a limb, I also sometimes like to reverse engineer something conceptually. You say your goal is you want people to take action. You want them to do something and to participate. That's the end mark. So then I ask myself, so what happens if they don't participate? What happens if they don't donate the money, take the action, educate somebody else? Well, then you're going to have a cascade of effects that nobody wants. And that gets into your point, where there's always an opportunity to structure something to possibly show the opposite, or to kind of set it up where there's a payoff for an unexpected ending. So I guess, especially in short format, especially on YouTube, kind of a novel, unpredictable approach can be very beneficial.
It's so true. And when you think about some of the most memorable short films or ads you have in your life, you've seen in your life, the quirkier, the more emotionally emotive, the quirkier ones are the ones you come back with. You're never going to come back with that perfect visual graphic that you saw once, but you are going to remember ones that made you laugh or made you, you know, wince or made you do something. You're going to remember them, and I think that's very important. You're right, absolutely right. Yeah.
I think I completely agree with what you know, Bill and Andrew and Raja are saying in terms of this is the time to take risks. You know, the next 3 days, take risks, nothing to lose. Let's be creative, let's be innovative, let's figure out new things and new ideas and create lots of babies. And then we may have to put some of them on the side, but let us be creative with our ideas, with our thoughts, and not try and do standard things, because standard things tend to be not that exciting, and not that interesting, and not that catchy. So I completely support
a couple of points of housekeeping, that just for your clarity, you need to finish your edit by 1 o'clock on Saturday. Saturday. And 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday, because it'll take you an hour or two to get it out into the format and movie format you want to show it in. So think that through in your mind, that 1:30 at best, you should have finished your edit with your editor, right? So even if you have to stay up all night, think about it, guys, plan it carefully. You know, the room is open 24 hours, and we have primed the editors and the photographers that they'll work with you all night if necessary. So you have to choose, but your target deadline is 1 o'clock. Keep that in your mind on Saturday, and then it's done. You know, so good luck.
Let's talk about a little bit about audience, because I think that was brought up. Let's talk about that a little bit. You have multiple audiences. So the first audience is your audience on Saturday night, where we have a big gala dinner and an awards ceremony, where we've invited lots of friends, from successful entrepreneurs and successful business people to leading political leaders of our country and from around the world. People are joining us for this dinner. And at that dinner, that's your first audience. And you will have a chance to present, like you did just now, physically, and you will have a film, which you show. So you have 2 bites at the apple in terms of a presentation and a film. Your second audience is the YouTube audience, where on our YouTube channel we will put these films, and you will be judged on how many hits and how much capital you raise for your project over the next 1 month, 3 months, and 1 year. So you need to keep this project alive in terms of reaching out to people continuously and marketing and selling. In business, we do that all the time. When we're trying to raise money for our projects, we don't just have a 3-day thing and go and meet someone and the money arrives. We have to keep working at it again and again, meeting investors, meeting people. You have an idea, change the idea, improve the idea, raise the capital, bring the resources together, improve the idea, set up the first factory, set up the second factory, as an example. Similarly, in your social vision, that's the same energy we're trying to bring together. So this product that you create has to be something that can have longevity. And you have to think, how do you do that? If it's a simple presentation with a few pictures and we want to do this, people will look at that once, it probably loses its interest very soon. But if it's got, I mean, who would have thought Gangnam Style would have got 1 billion views? First time I saw that, I thought it was hysterical and funny, but you know, quirky and ridiculous in some ways, and yet, you know, 1 billion views. So the key is, how do you create something that's viral, that's contagious, in terms of your enthusiasm, your passion, that's got enough edge to it, and that inspires people to tell their friends, you've got to watch that. How do you do that?
We haven't discussed this, and I'm
Sure.
almost afraid to talk about
Yeah.
it in front of everybody,
No,
because
no,
it
it's
puts
all
us
open.
on the spot, though. Well, 2 things that you said. I think that long-term audience is more important than the gala audience. I mean,
Agreed.
you said
Agreed.
first audience,
Agreed.
but in terms of
I
that
was
gala
being-
audience is here for you. They're going to like what you do.
Yeah, that was
Don't worry about those
chronological.
people. It's the other people. But the other thing that we haven't discussed is A film is like a chain, and a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And you know, we talked about having to kill your babies and things like that. And we have this target of 3 to 5 minutes. But it seems to me that if something is really good at 2 minutes,
Yes.
it might not be good at 3 minutes.
Sure.
Okay, just throw this out in the way you're thinking of things. It's really, let's make the best film it is.
Exactly.
And let's really, you know, when it comes down to that editing time, that's when we really get critical. And in some of, you know, some of the strongest messages that are out there, I mean, commercials, adverts have learned how to make every frame valuable in that 30 seconds.
Sure.
So that it's just perfect and it's just, you know, and
If I
it
may just comment on what you've said, this is completely free. There's freedom here. So if it's 2 minutes, 1 minute, 6 minutes, it just can't be 1 hour, right? It's got to be something that's crisp and short. And those are the type of things that you all need to work with very experienced directors who will be working with you all the time, and with a team of resources that will help you to think about these things and be critical, hopefully constructively critical, in terms of helping figure out what makes sense and what works, what doesn't work, and so on. But you've got a huge resource pool here of people, an audience, a pilot audience, where you can test everything. And that's the great benefit of this type of an event.
And just to reassure you that apart from the wonderful directors you've seen already who are going to working with you, you've got a very good editing team, editor each, who is also an animator and can do animation with you. And you've got a cameraman and a sound guy who can, all-in-one, who can do your film, help you do the filming. And you can go outside, you can do a flash mob anywhere you want, you can do little village scenes, whatever you need to do, you've got a team with you. So I want you to be courageous and fearless about this, because don't limit yourself to the tension of having to deliver a film in 3 days and what it means. You've got to come to this in a fearless way, saying that whatever we make is going to be amazing and we're going to work at it for the next 2 days and make it beautiful. And be fearless, be courageous, and treat it in that way, that it's something that you're going to bring to the table. And it could be, as you said, a 1 minute wow, or a 4 minute tearjerker. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be, or a funny Seinfeld episode. It could be anything, right? So it could be a beautiful graphic looping around. Something that just you feel will move you, your peers, us, and then this broader YouTube audience, right? So think like that, please. And be fearless.
Yeah, and just on that, I mean, we're saying film, but there's so many aspects to that communication. There have been great projects done, all with text, all with just colored screens and voiceover. There's so many ways. If you feel you can't accomplish the image that you think you need to communicate an idea, jump outside the box. There's probably a way to do it without the image. So just keep your mind open to everything that you can put in terms of soundscape, color, text, graphics, pauses, power of silence.
And as Bollywood would teach you, there is no shame in being inspired by other people's work. So do look for good examples, and if you see them on YouTube, show the editor, this is what I want to make. Show the director and persuade them that this is the way to do it. You know, let's do it this way, guys.
As T.S. Eliot said, good poets borrow, great poets steal.
Andrew went to the same film school that I've been teaching at for a while. And one of the classes that I've taught, we say it's not about making this class is not about making a great film or making a good film. It's about making a film well. And I think this is also process. Yes, the goal is to make a very good film, but it's also for you to learn how you collaborate, but also how you how you communicate, how you figure out what the idea is out of all this information we already have, how you figure out the idea and how it is to best put that across. And it's also about empowering each one of you individually. I haven't met you yet, but I have been around long enough to know that each one of you are unique manifestations of God's will in this world. And that you are all here and you all have something very, very important to give. And it's about hearing that in each other and about finding it in yourselves.
In fact, one of the things I was thinking about when we first thought about this project, you discussed it with us, was the idea that there are going to be 18 leaders in each group. That means 18 potential directors. So I'm looking forward to seeing the energy of this collaboration. This is going to be interesting because you're all potentially directors. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, this chemistry, and how you form teams. And that will also be a criteria for what we're looking for, is that how do you work as a team? Because we're going to be looking for that as well in our criteria of trying to evaluate the best film. And we'll be looking for that as well. So please keep that in mind.
I think we should open it up to the audience.
Yes, please.
Questions and interaction with the audience.
And then we'll get the directors to choose their teams, I think, after that.
Yeah, the way it'll work now is that the 4 groups presented to the audience, and each of the directors who presented earlier this morning will choose one of those teams to work with. And hopefully they have done that or are doing that at the moment, thinking through that. You're in the process of doing that, great. And then the rest of us will have a more leisurely time to be able to spend time with each group, give our ideas, give our thoughts with each group, and then to choose whether we want to be kind of ambassadors at large, helping all the groups, or helping one group in particular, and so on. So we will have a slightly broader mentorship role.
My question is sort of specific to situation we have here. The documentary we're supposed to be making is a side of a problem and a solution structure. So how much time would you generally advise to focus on the problem and on the solution? Because if you spend too little time on the problem, the solution looks trivial. But if you spend too much time on the problem, people might lose interest in the documentary and not really appreciate the solution.
I think it's really up to you. There is no format. You don't have to do a problem and a solution. I mean, if that's how you want to do it, fine. Clearly, that's a simple model, right? There's a problem, here's a solution. But there are many ways to present the same issue. To make it emotive, to make it inspirational. It can be a story, it can be other things. So you've got to think creatively. This is not about being spoon-fed. This is about you coming up with your creative, innovative ideas and brainstorming, and then narrowing it down to the ones that work with people that can help you and guide you and work with you to figure it out. Perhaps, Bill, you can give some insight.
I would say this is not, I'm not sidestepping your question. It's a reasonable question, but the footage that you gather will tell you the answer to that. If you have certain people, if you interview certain people in this film, they will start talking back to you and they will say, this needs to be in and this needs to be here. I don't think you need to worry about that. I think kind of set your goals and the footage will tell you what the right relationship is.
I think have a direction in mind, but keep yourself flexible, because you never know, you might have the perfect plan for your questions and your answers and your facts and everything, and then you'll come to edit table with all this material and it's all going to just fly out the window and you're going to have to start all over again, right? So I would say that don't think that problem, solution, don't limit yourself, don't limit yourself. Think big world change, or think what can I do for the world, think what should be done, or new tech, or what. Don't think alone about problem and solution, because that's such a good lecture format, but it's not necessarily a good film format. Right?
Thank you. Yeah.
That light.
Hi, I'm Vikas Bagri. I work at the National Innovation Council and the advisor to Prime Minister's office. We're basically looking at how do we look at innovations and promote innovations in the government and in academia, research, industry, led by the government. This is just a thought for the leaders and for the various groups. You've presented something interesting. It's led by some research that you've done. Can you change the discourse? Can you change the debate? So, for example, you're looking at waste management. Can you say, how do we actually produce less waste? So, is that a thought which one might want to explore and therefore change the solutions? So instead of more bigger landfills or better recycling techniques, can we focus on the first word, which is reduce, and therefore maybe reduce the problem itself. We're looking at corruption and governance, so we're looking at systems and processes and why corruption happens and so on. Can you look at corruption of a mind, and therefore your corruption of your mind and my mind, and can we reduce that, and therefore corruption and governance. So I just want to encourage you to think with a completely open mindset and not target the problem and therefore find a solution in a very usual way. So when you say corruption, you go to government, you go to politicians and so on and so forth, and so just think about that. That's about it. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to what Vikas said. Vikas, as an example of a resource, has worked in the Prime Minister's office with some of our great innovation leaders like Sam Pitroda for many years. They have done huge amounts of research. He's a font of information on waste management, recycling, corruption, governance, education, healthcare, any topic. He can get that information from the government for you, to share it with you. The point is, what he's saying here is, a lot of work's already been done. Use the resources in this room as a team to figure out who are the people I need to talk to figure out how to make this project something really innovative and different. Point number one. Point number two, at the end of the day, all these problems start with the mind. As Buddha said, all that we are arises with our minds and with our thoughts. And so what Vikas is saying is something very, very important. How can you create inspiration in people's minds to start to change these things? It's not about the external often. It's actually often about the internal. How can you affect the internal world? It's not easy to do, but how can you? Can we do that? So I think it's a wonderful point you made.
There was an interesting study I read. They went to residences, people's houses. They said, hey, can we put up a 5-foot sign for someone who's running for political office? And pretty much universally, people said, no, you're not putting that on my lawn, not interested. Then they went out and they said, hey, can we put this small sticker in your window for this candidate? If the people had some affinity to him, they'd say, sure. They could go back 3 weeks later and say, hey, we have this 5-foot sign we want to put on your lawn. And the people who already had the sticker up in their window, actually a good percentage of them said, absolutely. They already bought in, they were already invested. So you talk about with the waste situation, well, what can people do to reduce waste? That may be a very valid solution on its own, but it may not be. I don't actually know the details on this. But what it is it's an action that somebody can take themselves that creates a personal relationship with a problem that's easy to do. And then you can elevate them to higher levels of participation. So you may have your message, you may have your goal of what you want to accomplish, but it may not be something that people feel comfortable actioning on. So just think about tiering what you want from the world. Just, again, as a leader and in the group environment, take the initiative to find a role for yourself. If you're feeling like there's stuff going on, see where you can bring value to the project and work your way in. Stay involved, please. And if you are involved, again, own the leadership role and find who can take on more and include them, delegate, use the resources, which is your other team members. It's a very dynamic team process. So making that happen is also one of the roles of being a filmmaker in this.
So we thank our very eminent panel. We give them a big round of applause. We'd like to say a special thanks to Andrew for having come all the way to spend this time with us. And we'd like to leave you with something that will remind you of Tegel. Come. Many thanks to Bill as well. And we cannot forget our moderator who's been such a support to us, and that's Raja Chaudhary.